August 2nd, 216 BC. The sun rises over a dusty plain in southern Italy, and 80,000 Roman soldiers, the largest army the Republic has ever assembled, stare across at 50,000 Carthaginians, led by a 32-year-old general who's about to teach Rome a lesson in annihilation. By sunset, 50,000 Romans will be dead, and Hannibal Barca will have executed the most perfect tactical victory in military history. Think about those numbers for a second. 50,000 men killed in a single afternoon. That's more than the entire American death toll on D-Day, except compressed into 8 hours of hand-to-hand butchery. The fate of the Roman Republic, and with it, Western civilization as we know it, hung by a thread so thin it was invisible. Yet by the end of this video, you'll understand how a numerically inferior force turned Roman strength into a death trap. I'm about to reveal 3 things that will change how you see ancient warfare forever. First, the deliberate weakness that became Hannibal's deadliest weapon. Second, why Roman soldiers were packed so tightly they couldn't lift their swords. And third, the horrifying truth about what happened when 70,000 men tried to escape through a closing noose. But here's what makes this story truly unbelievable. How did Hannibal convince his center to retreat while still fighting? What made Roman commanders walk straight into the most obvious trap in history? Why were Roman soldiers killing each other in the final hour? And how did one afternoon's work doom Rome to a decade of terror? To understand how 50,000 Carthaginians destroyed the greatest military machine in the ancient world, we need to go back 2 years to when Hannibal crossed the Alps and Rome learned what fear truly meant. 2 years before Cannae, Hannibal Barca did something Rome thought impossible. He marched 38,000 men and 37 war elephants over the Alps in winter, losing half his army to cold and starvation, and descended into northern Italy like a plague. The Senate laughed at first, called him a madman, dismissed the threat. Then he destroyed 2 Roman armies at Trebia and Trasimene, killing 30,000 legionaries in battles that weren't even close. Now it's 216 BC, and Rome has stopped laughing. The Republic is hemorrhaging men, money, and territory. 3 separate commanders have failed to stop this Carthaginian monster. The question everyone in Rome is asking isn't whether they can beat Hannibal anymore. It's whether they can survive him. Think about those numbers for a second. 30,000 Roman soldiers dead in 2 battles. That's 6 full legions gone. At Trebia, Hannibal lured a Roman army across an icy river at dawn, ambushed them with hidden cavalry, and slaughtered 16,000 men while they were still wet and freezing. At Trasimene, he caught Consul Flaminius marching through morning fog along a lake shore, trapped 15,000 Romans against the water, and butchered them in 3 hours. The bodies floated so thick that locals couldn't fish the lake for months. Here's what the Roman chronicles don't want you to understand. This isn't just about battlefield casualties. Hannibal is destroying Rome's ability to wage war itself. Each dead legionary represents 20 years of training. From childhood combat drills to veteran discipline, each fallen officer represents irreplaceable tactical knowledge. Each destroyed legion means depleted manpower reserves, devastated recruiting grounds, villages throughout Italy that have already given their sons and have no more to give. The treasury is emptying faster than tax revenue can replenish it. Equipping 6 new legions costs approximately 12 million denarii. Rome doesn't have 12 million denarii, and here's where it gets genuinely insane. Hannibal's winning with tactical innovations Rome has never seen before. At Trebia, he hid 2,000 men in a streambed overnight in December, standing in freezing water for 8 hours just to spring an ambush at the perfect moment. At Trasimene, He arranged his forces on hills surrounding a valley road, waited until Roman scouts passed through the trap's mouth, then closed it behind them. These aren't conventional battles. They're executions disguised as military engagements. The strategic situation is becoming mathematically impossible. Rome started this war with approximately 700,000 adult male citizens capable of military service. They've lost 40,000 in 2 years. That's 6% of their entire military-age population. Dead. Not wounded, not captured. Dead. Their allies are watching these massacres and quietly reconsidering their loyalties. Cities in southern Italy are sending envoys to Hannibal, testing whether Carthaginian rule might be preferable to dying for Rome. The Senate meets daily now, emergency sessions that last until midnight. The debates have shifted from how do we beat Hannibal to how do we prevent total collapse. Some senators advocate abandoning southern Italy entirely, pulling all forces back to defend Rome itself. Others demand immediate offensive action, arguing that appearing weak will accelerate Allied defections. The faction arguing for caution, for avoiding pitched battles, for wearing Hannibal down through attrition, is losing political ground daily. Because Rome doesn't do caution. Rome does aggression, overwhelming force, shock and awe. And that cultural preference for offensive warfare is about to kill 50,000 more Romans in a single afternoon. Because the Senate is about to make a decision that will change military history forever. They're going to raise the largest army the Roman Republic has ever fielded, put it under divided command, and send it to fight Hannibal in open battle on ground of his choosing. What could possibly go wrong? The Roman Senate meets in emergency session. The walls echo with angry voices, desperate proposals, arguments that verge on violence. Some senators advocate defensive warfare, shadowing Hannibal's army, avoiding pitched battles, waiting for him to run out of supplies. It's the smart strategy, the safe strategy, and it's already proven effective under Fabius Maximus, who earned the nickname the Delayer. But Rome isn't built on caution. Rome is built on aggression, on the belief that Roman discipline and Roman courage can break any enemy. And there's a deeper problem. Hannibal is ravaging the Italian countryside, burning farms, massacring villages, cutting trade routes. Every day he remains in Italy is another day Rome looks weak, impotent, unable to protect its own citizens. The Senate makes its decision. They'll raise the largest army in Roman history, put it under the command of 2 consuls, and crush Hannibal in a single decisive battle. It's brilliant strategy or suicidal arrogance, and they're about to find out which. Here's what makes this decision so mathematically insane. A standard consular army consists of 2 legions plus auxiliary forces, roughly 20,000 men total. Rome is about to field 4 consular armies simultaneously. 80,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry. That's 4 times the normal deployment, requiring 4 times the logistics, 4 times the supplies, 4 times the coordination. The recruitment alone takes months. Every Roman citizen between 17 and 46 years old with property worth more than 400 denarii gets conscripted. No exceptions. No deferrals. The city is bleeding men. The financial cost defies comprehension. Each legionary requires armor, weapons, tools, rations for 3 months minimum. That's 80,000 helmets, 80,000 gladi, 80,000 pila, 320,000 days of grain rations just for the initial campaign. The Senate empties the treasury, liquidates emergency reserves, borrows from allied cities. The estimated cost exceeds 18 million denarii. Think about that number. Rome's entire annual revenue is approximately 40 million denarii. They're spending nearly half their yearly budget on one army for one battle. But here's where the political calculation becomes fascinating. Fabius Maximus's defensive strategy was working. For 6 months, he shadowed Hannibal's army, refused battle, cut supply lines, made every mile of Italian territory cost the Carthaginians blood and resources. Roman casualties dropped to nearly zero. Hannibal's army was slowly starving, unable to forage effectively, unable to force the decisive battle he needed. It was textbook attrition warfare, and it was succeeding. Except it was humiliating. Roman citizens watched their farms burn, while Roman armies sat in fortified camps doing nothing. Allied cities watched Roman legions retreat from Carthaginian forces half their size. The political pressure became unbearable. Senators who supported Fabius got shouted down in the forum. Tribunes who advocated patience got replaced in elections. The Roman people demanded action, demanded vengeance, demanded the kind of glorious victory that Rome's ancestors had won through courage and aggression. So the Senate gives them exactly what they want. 8 legions, 2 consuls, one massive army designed to settle this war in a single afternoon. They choose their commanders, Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus, give them unlimited authority, and send them south to find Hannibal. What the Senate doesn't realize is that Hannibal has been waiting for exactly this decision. He's been baiting Rome for 2 years, destroying their armies, ravaging their countryside, doing everything possible to provoke them into the one response that plays into his hands. Massed battle, overwhelming force, Roman discipline against Carthaginian cunning. And now they're bringing him 80,000 Romans, packed into tight formations, commanded by leaders who hate each other, marching toward ground he's already chosen. The trap is set. Rome just volunteered to walk into it. Rome mobilizes everything. 8 full legions plus auxiliary forces, 80,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry. It's the largest field army Rome has ever assembled, nearly double the size of a normal consular army. The logistics alone are staggering. Feeding 80,000 men requires thousands of tons of grain per day. Moving them requires coordination between dozens of officers. Equipping them drains the treasury. But Rome has the manpower, the resources, the infrastructure. This is what the Republic does best, turning citizens into soldiers, forging them into disciplined formations that have conquered the Mediterranean. Across the plain at Cannae, Hannibal counts his forces. 40,000 infantry, 10,000 cavalry. He's outnumbered in infantry nearly 2 to 1. In cavalry, he has a slight edge. On paper, this battle should be a massacre, and it will be, but not the way Rome expects. Let's break down exactly what Rome brings to this battlefield. Each legion consists of 4,200 infantry, split into maniples of 120 men each. Heavy infantry, the Astati and Principes, wear chainmail, carry the gladius and pilum, fight in disciplined formations that have broken every phalanx and warband they've ever faced. Behind them, the triarii, veteran spearmen who only engage when everything else fails. The Roman saying goes, "It's come to the triarii," meaning the situation is desperate. Rome has brought enough triarii to this battle that their deployment alone signals how seriously they're taking this threat. The auxiliary forces add another dimension. Italian allied troops, Latins and Campanians who fight alongside Roman citizens, providing skirmishers, light infantry, additional cavalry. These aren't conscripts or mercenaries. They're professional soldiers with their own tactical traditions, integrated into Roman command structure. The total force represents nearly 10% of Rome's entire military-age male population, concentrated in one place, under one command, for one purpose: annihilation. Here's what the Roman commanders see when they survey Hannibal's army. 40,000 infantry, that's a patchwork of different nationalities. Gauls, tall and fierce but undisciplined. Spanish warriors, brave but lacking Roman cohesion. Libyan veterans, tough and experienced but outnumbered. There's no unified equipment standard, no single tactical doctrine, no deep formations. To Roman eyes, it looks like a mercenary rabble held together by Hannibal's personal charisma, and charisma doesn't stop pilum volleys. But here's what the chronicles don't tell you. Hannibal's 10,000 cavalry aren't just numerically superior to Rome's 6,000. They're qualitatively superior in ways that will prove decisive. His Spanish and Gallic heavy cavalry are professional warriors who've trained together for years, who understand combined arms tactics, who can execute complex maneuvers in the chaos of battle. His Numidian light cavalry are masters of harassment warfare, able to attack, retreat, reform, attack again with a fluidity Roman cavalry can't match. Rome's cavalry are mostly Italian allies, brave but inexperienced, riding horses that aren't bred for warfare. Think about that for a second. Rome is bringing an army where the cavalry, the arm that controls maneuver and pursuit, is their weakest component. Hannibal is bringing an army where cavalry is his strongest weapon. In ancient warfare, infantry decides who controls the battlefield. Cavalry decides whether the defeated army dies or escapes. Rome's about to learn this lesson in the most brutal way possible. The Roman legions march south toward Cannae, 80,000 men moving in columns that stretch for miles. Their commanders are confident. They have superior numbers, superior training, superior equipment, the backing of the greatest military state in the Mediterranean. What they don't have is any comprehension of what Hannibal's about to do with that cavalry advantage. What they don't understand is that their greatest strength, those 80,000 disciplined infantry, is about to become the weapon Hannibal uses to kill them. Rome gives command of this massive army to two men who hate each other, Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus. It's standard Roman practice, this dual consulship, designed to prevent military dictatorship, to balance power. In practice, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Varro is aggressive, ambitious, a populist, who's promised the Roman people he'll end Hannibal's invasion decisively. He's from the merchant class, new money, proving himself through boldness. Paulus is old aristocracy, cautious, methodical, traumatized by the memory of Trasimene, where Rome lost 15,000 men in an ambush. They alternate command daily, and on Varro's days, he pushes for immediate battle. On Paulus's days, he advocates delay, better positioning, more reconnaissance. Hannibal watches this dysfunctional command structure and sees opportunity. All he has to do is wait for Varro's day. Here's what makes this command arrangement catastrophically stupid. In a normal military campaign, unified command is essential. Orders flow from a single source. Strategy remains consistent. Tactical doctrine doesn't change based on someone's calendar. But Rome's constitutional system makes that impossible. Every odd-numbered day, Varro commands. Every even-numbered day, Paulus commands. And their strategic visions are polar opposites. The army literally doesn't know what it's supposed to be doing from one sunrise to the next. On July 30th, Paulus has command. He orders the army to establish a fortified camp 6 miles from Hannibal's position, scouts the terrain carefully, sends reconnaissance parties to map every hill and valley. Forbids aggressive action. The legionaries dig trenches, build palisades, wait. On July 31st, Varro takes command. He immediately orders an advance, moves the army within 2 miles of Hannibal's forces, deploys for battle. Hannibal refuses to engage. Varro retreats, frustrated. On August 1st, Paulus resumes command. He orders the army back to defensive positions, tries to reverse Varro's advance. The centurions are receiving contradictory orders every 24 hours. Unit cohesion is disintegrating. Think about what this does to army morale. 80,000 soldiers watching their commanders publicly disagree about basic strategy. Half the officers support Varro's aggression, believe Roman courage and discipline can smash any enemy. The other half supports Paulus's caution. Remember what happened at Trasimene when Rome charged blindly into Hannibal's trap. The debates aren't private. They happen in command councils where junior officers witness two consuls arguing, sometimes shouting, occasionally threatening each other. This is the largest army Rome has ever fielded, and it's being commanded by men who can barely speak civilly. Here's where it gets genuinely insane. Hannibal has scouts watching the Roman camp constantly. He knows about the alternating command. He knows Varro is desperate for battle, knows Paulus is desperate to avoid it. So Hannibal times his provocations carefully. On Paulus's days, he stays defensive, refuses engagement, makes it easy for the cautious consul to justify inaction. On Varro's days, he deploys aggressively, sends cavalry to harass Roman positions, burns farms within sight of their camp, does everything possible to make Varro look weak and cowardly for not attacking. The psychological warfare is surgical. Every time Varro commands and doesn't attack, his political enemies in Rome gain ammunition. Every time Paulus commands and successfully avoids battle, Varro's supporters accuse him of cowardice. The Senate receives daily dispatches from both consuls, contradictory reports, blame-shifting, political maneuvering disguised as military analysis. Rome's military command has become a political circus, and Hannibal is the ringmaster. August 2nd arrives. It's Varro's day. He's endured 6 days of alternating command, watching Paulus delay and hesitate, feeling the pressure from Rome to deliver the decisive victory he promised. Hannibal deploys his army on open ground near Cannae. The challenge is explicit, public, unmistakable. Varro issues the orders. Battle formation, advance. Today, Rome fights. And Paulus, despite his better judgment, despite his certainty that this is exactly what Hannibal wants, has no choice but to follow Varro's command. Because it's Varro's day. Hannibal positions his army near Cannae, a small town in Apulia, southern Italy. It's not random. He studied this terrain for weeks, walked every meter of it, understood exactly how its features will serve his plan. The plain is relatively flat, bounded by the Aufidus River on one side. Perfect for maneuvering large formations, perfect for cavalry operations, perfect for what he's about to do. The Romans approach from the northwest, see Hannibal's position, and Varro smiles. This is exactly what he wants. Open ground, no ambush points, no terrain tricks like Trasimene. Just two armies facing each other in honest battle. Roman discipline against Carthaginian cunning. And with 80,000 men, Varro knows who should win. Paulus looks at the same terrain and sees something different. He sees how narrow the deployment area is, how the river constricts maneuver space, how cavalry will dominate the flanks. He urges caution, better positioning, waiting for more favorable ground. Varro ignores him. It's his day of command, and he's done waiting. Let's examine exactly what makes this ground so tactically brilliant. The usable battlefield is approximately 2 kilometers wide, constrained by the Aufidus River on the Roman right and rising ground on the left. Think about that dimension. 2 kilometers to deploy 86,000 Romans and 50,000 Carthaginians. That's 68,000 men per kilometer of frontage. The density is suffocating. Roman legions normally deploy with spacing that allows tactical flexibility, room to maneuver within the formation, gaps between maniples for reserves to advance through. Here, they'll be packed so tightly that flexibility becomes impossible. Here's what the Roman scouts completely miss. The ground slopes slightly toward the river, barely noticeable to casual observation, but enough to affect drainage. The south wind, the Vulturnus, blows dust and sand constantly across the battlefield. It's August in southern Italy. The temperature will reach 35 degrees Celsius by midday. The Romans will be fighting with sun and wind in their faces, breathing dust, half blinded by glare. Hannibal positioned his army so these environmental factors work entirely in his favor. The Carthaginians will have wind at their backs, sun behind them, clear visibility. But here's where Hannibal's tactical genius becomes genuinely terrifying. Varro sees open ground and thinks, perfect for infantry battle. He's right, but he's missed the crucial detail. This terrain is even better for cavalry. The flat ground allows mounted forces to build speed, achieve devastating shock impact. The river on one flank creates a natural anchor point that cavalry can use to pin enemy forces against. And most importantly, the narrow frontage means whoever controls the flanks controls the entire battlefield. There's no room for the Romans to extend their line, no space to outflank the flankers. Paulus understands this immediately. He's fought enough battles to recognize when terrain favors the enemy. He argues with Varro, right there in front of the senior officers, making his case with increasing desperation. We're outnumbered in cavalry. This ground negates our infantry advantage. Hannibal chose this battlefield because it suits his strength and negates ours. We should withdraw, find terrain that favors heavy infantry over mounted forces. Every word is tactically correct. Every word is politically impossible for Varro to accept without appearing cowardly. Varro's response reveals everything wrong with Roman command at this moment. He's thinking like a Roman general, assuming that the decisive action happens where the most soldiers are, in the infantry clash. He's not thinking like Hannibal, who understands that battles aren't decided by where most men fight, but by what happens on the flanks and in the rear. August 2nd, 8 a.m. The Roman army deploys for battle. 80,000 infantry forming up in the suffocating heat. 6,000 cavalry taking positions on both flanks. Officers shouting orders, standards raised. The machinery of Roman military power grinding into motion. Across the plain, Hannibal watches them compress themselves into exactly the formation he's been praying they'd choose. His officers exchange glances. This is actually happening. Rome is walking into the trap. Now comes the hard part. Executing a tactical maneuver so complex, so dependent on perfect timing and coordination, that if any piece fails, Hannibal's entire army dies. August 2nd, 216 BC dawn. Hannibal deploys his army in a formation that looks suicidal. His infantry forms a crescent, convex toward the Romans, bulging outward like a bent bow. In the center, his weakest troops, Gallic and Spanish infantry, barely 20,000 men. They're good fighters, brave, but not the disciplined killing machines Rome will face them with. On the wings, his African veterans, 20,000 heavy infantry wearing Roman armor, stripped from dead legionaries at Trebia and Trasimene. These men are Hannibal's elite, his shock troops, his answer to Roman discipline. And here's the insane part. He's hiding them. He's putting his weakest troops front and center, his strongest troops on the flanks, partially refused, angled back. To Roman scouts, it looks like Hannibal's center is his main force, his wings are secondary. It looks like arrogance or desperation or incompetence. It's none of those things. Its genius so audacious that 2,000 years later, military academies still study what happens next. Let's break down exactly what this formation requires. The Gallic and Spanish infantry in the center must hold a line roughly 800 meters wide. They're deployed only 8 ranks deep, compared to Rome's 12 to 15 ranks. That's deliberate. Hannibal needs them shallow enough to bend, flexible enough to retreat while maintaining cohesion, brave enough to absorb punishment without breaking completely. Think about what he's asking. These 20,000 men must fight 80,000 Romans, must give ground slowly while staying organized, must endure casualties that would shatter normal formations, and must trust that their commander knows what he's doing, while everything looks like defeat. The African heavy infantry on both wings, 10,000 on the left, 10,000 on the right, stand in deeper formations, possibly 12 to 16 ranks. They're positioned at 45-degree angles, refused back from the bulging center. From the Roman perspective, across the plain, they look like secondary forces, reserves positioned to support the main battle in the center. But here's what the chronicles don't tell you. These Africans are wearing captured Roman equipment: helmets, chainmail, scutum shields, gladi. They're trained to fight in Roman tactical formations. When the moment comes, they'll look like Roman reinforcements to the legionaries in the chaos of battle. Here's where the psychological warfare becomes devastating. Varro sees this crescent formation, and it confirms everything he believes. Hannibal's putting his weakest troops forward because he doesn't have better options. The center is deployed too shallow, which means it'll break quickly under Roman pressure. The wings are refused, which suggests Hannibal expects his center to collapse and wants reserves positioned to cover the retreat. To Varro, this looks like a commander who knows he's outnumbered, who's trying to salvage something from an impossible situation, who's already planning his escape route. What Varro doesn't understand is that this formation isn't designed to stop the Roman advance. It's designed to absorb it, to swallow it, to turn Roman aggression into a weapon that kills them. The convex crescent will become concave as the Romans push forward. The bulge will invert. And when it does, when the Romans have pushed deep into what becomes a pocket, those African veterans will wheel inward 90 degrees and slam into Roman flanks that suddenly have no protection, no room to maneuver, no way to respond. But executing this maneuver requires something that shouldn't be possible in ancient warfare. It requires the Gallic and Spanish center to conduct a fighting retreat for hours, staying organized while being pushed back by overwhelming force. It requires the African wings to hold position, watch their comrades dying in the center, and wait for the perfect moment to attack. It requires cavalry coordination with infantry that most armies can't achieve. And most impossibly, it requires every unit to trust that when the plan looks like it's failing catastrophically, that's actually when it's working perfectly. One mistake, one unit breaking early, one commander panicking, and Hannibal's entire army gets destroyed. The margin for error is zero. While Roman attention focuses on the infantry clash everyone expects, Hannibal positions his real killing weapons on the extreme flanks. On his left, near the river, 8,000 heavy cavalry under Hasdrubal, his most trusted cavalry commander. These are Spanish and Gallic horsemen, professional warriors who fought in every battle of this war, men who understand that today's mission isn't glory, it's surgical precision. On his right, 2,000 Numidian light cavalry, masters of harassment warfare, skirmishers who can dance around heavier forces and disappear like smoke. The Romans have 6,000 cavalry total, split between both flanks. Normally, that's adequate. Against Hannibal, it's a death sentence. Here's what the Roman commanders don't understand yet. This battle won't be decided by infantry grinding against infantry. It'll be decided by who controls the flanks, who can maneuver, who can strike from unexpected angles. Hannibal's cavalry outnumbers Rome's, outclasses them in skill, and operates under a commander who's already visualizing exactly how this slaughter will unfold. Let's examine the cavalry matchup in brutal detail. On the Roman right flank, near the river, 2,400 Roman and Italian cavalry face Hasdrubal's 8,000 heavy horse. That's a 3.3 to 1 disadvantage. Think about those odds. In cavalry combat, where shock and momentum matter more than sustained fighting, numerical superiority isn't just an advantage, it's decisive. The Roman cavalry are brave, well-equipped, but they're mostly Italian allies who lack the professional training of Hannibal's veterans. Many have never fought in a major cavalry engagement. They're about to face men who've been perfecting mounted warfare for a decade. On the Roman left flank, the situation looks better on paper. 3,600 Roman cavalry against 2,000 Numidians. Rome has numerical superiority here, nearly 2 to 1. Except the Numidians aren't meant to win this flank. They're meant to tie down the Roman cavalry, keep them engaged, prevent them from supporting the infantry or reinforcing the collapsing right flank. Numidian tactics are built for exactly this mission. They skirmish, throw javelins, retreat, circle back, attack again. They're nearly impossible to pin down, impossible to bring to decisive battle. Those 3,600 Romans will spend the entire battle chasing shadows. Here's where it gets genuinely insane. Hasdrubal's mission isn't just to defeat the Roman right-wing cavalry. It's to annihilate them so quickly that his 8,000 heavy cavalry become free for redeployment. Hannibal needs that cavalry wing available within 30 minutes of battle commencement. That's an insane timeline. Normal cavalry engagements last hours, involve multiple charges and countercharges, end in gradual withdrawal rather than complete destruction. Hasdrubal needs to achieve in 30 minutes what normally takes half a day. And here's what the Roman commanders have completely failed to grasp. Once Hasdrubal destroys the Roman right wing and gains cavalry superiority, the entire tactical situation collapses. Infantry without cavalry support are vulnerable on their flanks. Infantry formations that get hit from behind by cavalry break instantly. The Roman legions, those 80,000 disciplined soldiers that Varro is counting on to win through sheer mass, become targets, not opponents. Targets. Hasdrubal knows this. Hannibal knows this. The Carthaginian cavalry have trained for exactly this scenario, practiced the maneuvers, understood their role in the larger battle plan. The Romans are still thinking about cavalry as a supporting arm for infantry. Hannibal's thinking about cavalry as the weapon that turns infantry battles into massacres. 9 a.m. The armies are fully deployed. 86,000 Romans facing 50,000 Carthaginians across a dusty plain in southern Italy. In the center, legionaries check their equipment, adjust helmets, grip shields. They think the battle will be decided where they stand. They're wrong. It'll be decided on the flanks by 10,000 horsemen most of them can't even see. And the killing is about to begin. Varro deploys the Roman army in a formation designed to do one thing: smash through Hannibal's center with overwhelming force. He deepens the usual Roman formation, packing his legionaries tighter than normal. Instead of 10 men deep, he goes 12 or even 15 deep. His logic is simple. Hannibal's center is weak, visibly weak. If Rome can punch through it quickly, the entire Carthaginian army collapses. The battle becomes a rout. Hannibal's veterans on the wings become irrelevant because there's no center to protect. And Rome wins through sheer mass and momentum. It's not subtle, it's not clever, but it's Roman. Disciplined infantry in tight formation, shields locked, advancing like a human avalanche that's broken every enemy Rome has ever faced. Except Hannibal isn't every enemy. Hannibal's been waiting for exactly this formation, this plan, this arrogant assumption that Roman strength can overcome Carthaginian trickery. When Varro orders the advance, Hannibal watches 80,000 Romans compress themselves into a space barely adequate for 40,000 and smiles. Let's calculate exactly what this compression means. A normal Roman legionary requires approximately 1.5 meters of frontage to fight effectively. Room to swing his gladius, space to maneuver his shield, enough gap between ranks to allow rotation of tired fighters. 80,000 infantry at normal spacing would require a frontage of 3 kilometers. The battlefield at Cannae offers 2 kilometers maximum. That means Roman soldiers are packed at roughly 1 meter intervals. Think about that. 1 meter between each man's shoulders. That's standing room only density, concert crowd compression. Except these men are wearing 20 kilograms of armor and equipment, carrying shields that weigh 7 kilograms each, trying to fight in summer heat that'll reach 35 degrees. Here's what this density does to Roman tactical flexibility. Normally, legionary formations operate with gaps between maniples, allowing reserves to push through, tired units to withdraw, wounded to be evacuated. At this compression, those gaps don't exist. The formation becomes a solid mass. Men in the front ranks can fight. Men in the second and third ranks can maybe reach over shoulders with their pila. Men beyond that are just weight, human ballast pushing forward, unable to see the enemy, unable to contribute anything except pressure. But here's where Varro's logic reveals its fatal flaw. He thinks concentration of force equals effectiveness. More men per meter equals more combat power. It's the opposite. At a certain density, you're not multiplying effectiveness, you're dividing it. 80,000 men compressed into this formation will have the actual combat effectiveness of maybe 30,000, because only soldiers who can reach the enemy matter. The other 50,000 are just there to push, to replace casualties, to die when the formation collapses. Paulus watches this deployment and experiences genuine horror. He's seen enough warfare to understand what's about to happen. We're creating our own prison, he tells Varro. When Hannibal's cavalry hits our flanks, we won't be able to turn to face them. We won't be able to retreat. We'll be so compressed, we'll suffocate before we're slaughtered. Varro dismisses him. We'll break their center in 30 minutes. Cavalry becomes irrelevant. He's not just wrong. He's creating the conditions for the most perfect military disaster in history. 9:30 a.m. Varro raises his hand. 80,000 Romans take their first step forward. The ground trembles. Dust rises in clouds. And Hannibal's 20,000 Gauls and Spaniards, deployed in their convex crescent, brace themselves for impact. They know what's coming. They know they have to bend without breaking. They know thousands of them will die in the next hour. What they don't know is whether their sacrifice will be enough. The battle begins not with the dramatic infantry clash everyone expects, but with cavalry action on both flanks. On the Roman right, near the river, 2,400 Roman and Italian cavalry face Hasdrubal's 8,000 heavy horse. The Romans are confident. They have good defensive terrain, with the river protecting their right. What they don't realize is that Hasdrubal isn't trying to defeat them gradually. He's trying to annihilate them immediately. The charge is brutal, decisive, overwhelming. Hasdrubal's veterans slam into the Roman cavalry line with the weight of 8,000 horses and men who've been waiting 2 years to settle accounts. The Roman cavalry breaks, not slowly, not after prolonged fighting, but almost immediately. They flee north, pursued by Carthaginian horsemen who cut them down from behind. In 15 minutes, Rome has lost effective cavalry on its right flank. In 15 minutes, Hasdrubal has freed 8,000 heavy cavalry for redeployment, and Hannibal's trap has just sprung its first jaw. 9:45 a.m. Hasdrubal raises his sword. 8,000 Spanish and Gallic cavalry surge forward at the trot, building to canter, then gallop. The sound is apocalyptic. 32,000 hooves hammering packed earth. The ground shakes. Dust explodes into the air. The Roman cavalry, 2,400 strong, form a defensive line near the riverbank. They're trained for this. They've drilled these formations. But they've never faced odds like this. 3.3 Carthaginian horsemen for every Roman. That's not a battle. That's mathematics. Here's what makes this collision so catastrophically one-sided. Cavalry combat is about mass and momentum. 8,000 horses moving at 30 kilometers per hour generate approximately 400 metric tons of kinetic energy. The Roman line absorbs this impact and simply shatters. Horses collide with horses. Men are thrown from saddles. Swords slash, spears punch through armor. The fighting is face-to-face, intimate, horrifying. A Roman cavalryman kills the Gaul in front of him, looks up, and 3 more are there. The mathematics become personal. Think about what 15 minutes means in mounted combat. That's not enough time for multiple charges and countercharges. That's not enough time for tactical maneuvering and reformation. That's one sustained engagement where the numerically superior force simply overwhelms through relentless pressure. Roman cavalrymen fight bravely, kill enemies, die doing it. But bravery doesn't matter when you're outnumbered 3-1. Skill doesn't matter when the enemy has more skill and more numbers. The Roman cavalry line doesn't just lose, it disintegrates. Units lose cohesion, officers go down, standards fall. Men who might stand and die in organized formations break when they realize they're surrounded, outnumbered, abandoned. The retreat starts piecemeal, then becomes general. Cavalry streaming north away from the battlefield, pursued by Carthaginians who cut them down from behind. Fleeing cavalry are defenseless. You can't fight when you're running. You just die tired. Here's what the chronicles don't tell you about those 15 minutes. Approximately 1,800 Romans die. That's 75% casualties in a quarter hour. Another 400 are wounded, captured, or scattered so far, their combat ineffective. The Roman right-wing cavalry, 2,400 men at battle start, effectively ceases to exist as a fighting force at 10 a.m. Let that sink in. Rome just lost 1/3 of its total cavalry in the first 15 minutes of battle. And Hasdrubal, watching the last Romans flee north, doesn't celebrate, doesn't pursue beyond the immediate battlefield, doesn't rest. He reforms his 8,000 cavalry, checks casualties, minimal, and waits for the signal. Because the real mission is just beginning. Those 8,000 horsemen are about to become the weapon that ends Rome. While cavalry slaughters on the flanks, the infantry battle begins in the center. 80,000 Roman legionaries advance against Hannibal's 20,000 Gauls and Spaniards. The Carthaginian line buckles immediately, bends backward under Roman pressure. It's not a rout, not a collapse, but a controlled retreat, men fighting desperately while giving ground meter by meter. To the Romans, it looks like victory. They're pushing forward, breaking the enemy's center, doing exactly what Varro planned. The legionaries press harder, sensing triumph, and here's where Hannibal's genius becomes apparent. The Carthaginian center doesn't break. It bends, flexes, absorbs the pressure like a bow being drawn. The convex crescent slowly becomes concave, curving inward, and the Romans follow, pushing deeper into the pocket. They're packed so tightly now that men in the rear ranks can't even see the fighting, just push forward against the backs of men in front of them. Shoulders touch shoulders. Shields press against shields. And with every meter the Romans advance, they compress themselves further into a space that's becoming a killing box. 10 a.m. The Roman front ranks hit the Carthaginian center like a hammer. Pila fly first, 7-kilogram javelins designed to punch through shields and disable them. Thousands of iron-tipped spears arc through the morning air. Gauls and Spaniards fall, dozens, then hundreds. But the line holds. The survivors lock shields, brace for impact. Then the gladi come out. Roman short swords, 45 centimeters of Spanish steel, designed for stabbing in close quarters. The legionaries push into stabbing range. Men die. Blood soaks the ground, and the Carthaginian line takes 3 steps back. Here's what makes this retreat so tactically brilliant. The Gauls and Spaniards aren't running. They're conducting a fighting withdrawal under impossible pressure. 4-to-1 odds. 80,000 Romans pressing against 20,000 defenders. Normal formations would collapse in minutes. These men are giving ground at approximately 10 meters every 5 minutes. That's controlled. That's disciplined. That's exactly what Hannibal needs. Think about what this asks of these 20,000 soldiers. They're absorbing casualties that should break unit cohesion. Front rank fighters die. Second rank steps up, keeps fighting. Officers go down. Subordinates take command, maintain the formation. The psychological pressure is crushing. Everything screams retreat faster, run, save yourself. But they hold the line because they trust Hannibal, because they've trained for this. Because they understand that their job isn't to win this fight. It's to survive it long enough for the flanks to do their work. The Romans advance deeper. 50 meters, 100 meters. The convex crescent that bulged toward them is now concave, curving away, creating a pocket. And the legionaries are ecstatic. They're winning. They're breaking Hannibal's army. Officers shout encouragement. The rear ranks surge forward, adding their weight to the advance. The density increases. Now soldiers are packed at half-meter intervals. You can't lift your sword without hitting the man beside you. You can't turn around. You can barely breathe. 10:30 a.m. The Romans have advanced 200 meters into Hannibal's center. They've killed approximately 3,000 Carthaginians. Their own losses are maybe 1,500. The exchange rate favors Rome. Everything looks perfect. Except the Roman formation is now U-shaped, compressed into a killing zone, with flanks that are becoming increasingly exposed. And on both sides of this U, barely 300 meters away, stand Hannibal's African veterans, 20,000 heavy infantry wearing captured Roman armor. They've been watching this entire grinding advance, watching their comrades in the center die, watching the Romans compress themselves into the pocket, waiting for the signal. And Hannibal, standing on a slight rise where he can see the entire battlefield, watches the Roman formation achieve maximum compression, watches his center bend to the breaking point, watches 80,000 Romans pack themselves into a space designed for 40,000. He raises his hand, the signal, and 20,000 Africans begin their wheel inward. The Roman army has pushed deep into Hannibal's center. They're winning, they think, breaking through. And then Hannibal's African veterans move. 20,000 heavy infantry positioned on both wings, wheel inward 90 degrees. It's a perfectly coordinated maneuver, requiring discipline and timing that shouldn't be possible in the chaos of ancient battle. But these are Hannibal's best soldiers, men who've trained for exactly this moment. They slam into the Roman flanks simultaneously from both sides. The Romans aren't just surprised. They're geometrically trapped. They're compressed into a tight mass in the center, still pushing forward, and suddenly they're being hit from left and right by fresh troops wearing Roman armor, using Roman tactics, fighting with a coordination that makes them nearly unstoppable. The Roman formation, designed to break enemy centers, becomes a liability. Men can't turn to face threats from the sides. The rear ranks don't even know they're being flanked. And the slaughter begins in earnest. 10:35 a.m. 10,000 African infantry on the Roman left flank execute their wheel. They pivot 90 degrees, transforming from a refused defensive position into an attacking column that slams into exposed Roman flanks. The maneuver takes approximately 3 minutes. Think about what that requires. 10,000 men in formation, maintaining cohesion while changing direction by 90 degrees in the noise and dust and chaos of active battle. Modern armies with radio communication struggle with this complexity. Hannibal's Africans execute it flawlessly. Simultaneously, the 10,000 Africans on the Roman right perform the identical maneuver. Mirror image precision. Both wings hit the Roman flanks within seconds of each other. The coordination is surgical. This isn't battlefield improvisation. This is rehearsed, drilled, perfected over months of training. Every centurion knows exactly when to turn. Every soldier understands his role. The timing is so precise, it looks choreographed. Here's where the captured Roman armor becomes psychologically devastating. Roman legionaries on the flanks see troops in Roman helmets, carrying Roman shields, fighting in Roman formations. For critical seconds, they think reinforcements have arrived, their own reserves coming to support the attack. By the time they realize these are enemies, they're already dying. The confusion costs them precious seconds they don't have. Seconds where they could be turning to face the threat, reforming their lines, preparing defense. Instead, they're stabbed from the side while looking the wrong direction. The Roman formation is now U-shaped. 80,000 men compressed into a space 1 kilometer wide, 200 meters deep. The African veterans are attacking the outside of the U from both sides. Think about the geometry. Roman soldiers on the flanks can't turn to fight because men behind them are still pushing forward, still trying to break the Carthaginian center. They're trapped by their own comrades. Men are screaming quote 11, but the rear ranks can't hear, can't see, don't understand. They just keep pushing. The killing rate accelerates horrifically. The Africans aren't fighting disorganized rabble. They're fighting Romans who can't maneuver, can't use their training, can't deploy their weapons effectively. It's like stabbing men who are tied in place. Roman soldiers on the extreme flanks try to turn, try to face the threat. The men behind them won't let them, can't let them. The density is too high. So they die facing forward, killed from the side, unable to defend themselves. 10:45 a.m. The African assault has been ongoing for 10 minutes. Approximately 6,000 Romans are dead. Not from the grinding center battle. From the flank attacks they couldn't defend against. The casualty rate is 600 men per minute. Let that sink in. 10 Romans dying every second. And this is just the beginning. Because the Romans still don't understand what's happening. They still think they're winning in the center. They still think this is a temporary setback on the flanks that their superior numbers will overcome. They're about to learn otherwise, because Hasdrubal's 8,000 cavalry have finished reforming. And they're coming. Hasdrubal's heavy cavalry, having destroyed the Roman right wing, doesn't celebrate, doesn't loot, doesn't rest. They wheel around the entire rear of the battlefield, a sweeping cavalry maneuver covering miles, and hit the Roman left wing from behind. The Roman cavalry on that flank, already engaged with Numidian light horse, suddenly faces 8,000 heavy cavalry charging into their rear. They break instantly. There's no shame in it, no cowardice. You can't fight enemies in front and behind simultaneously. They flee, scattering north and west, leaving the battlefield entirely. And now Hannibal has achieved something that shouldn't be possible. He's achieved total cavalry superiority on both flanks. 10,000 Carthaginian horsemen now free to operate. The Roman infantry, 80,000 men, has no cavalry support, no flank protection, no way to prevent what happens next. Hasdrubal regroups his cavalry and prepares for the final act of this tragedy. 10:45 a.m. Hasdrubal surveys the routing Roman right-wing cavalry. His own casualties are minimal. Maybe 300 dead or wounded. He's destroyed 2,400 enemy cavalry in 15 minutes. Now comes the hard part. He needs to redeploy 8,000 horsemen across 3 kilometers of battlefield, around the entire rear of both armies, while maintaining formation and combat readiness. The maneuver will take 30 minutes. In ancient warfare, that's an eternity. Anything can happen in 30 minutes. Formations can collapse. Battles can be won or lost. But Hasdrubal has no choice. The plan requires complete cavalry dominance on both flanks. The cavalry wheel begins. 8,000 horses moving at trot, maintaining formation, circling behind the Carthaginian lines. They stay far enough back to avoid Roman observation, close enough to reach the left flank quickly. The distance is approximately 4 kilometers. At cavalry trot, that's roughly 25 minutes. Hasdrubal's officers maintain unit cohesion, keep the formation tight. These aren't fresh troops. They've just fought a brutal 15-minute engagement. Horses are tired. Men are exhausted. But they execute the maneuver flawlessly because they're professionals who understand that today's mission isn't finished. Here's what makes this cavalry redeployment so tactically devastating. The Roman left-wing cavalry, 3,600 strong, have been engaged with 2,000 Numidian light horse for 45 minutes. It's frustrating, exhausting combat. The Numidians won't stand and fight. They skirmish, throw javelins, retreat, circle back. The Romans are chasing shadows, burning energy, achieving nothing. They're tired, spread out, losing cohesion. And they have no idea that 8,000 heavy cavalry are approaching their rear. 11:15 a.m. Hasdrubal's cavalry completes its wheel. They're positioned behind the Roman left wing, 300 meters distant. The Roman cavalry are still engaged frontally with Numidians, completely unaware of the threat behind them. Hasdrubal gives the order. 8,000 horsemen charge. The Roman cavalry commanders hear the sound first. 32,000 hooves hammering earth. They turn, see the dust cloud, realize what's happening. Panic spreads instantly. You can't fight a two-front cavalry battle. The physics don't work. The tactics don't work. You just die. The Roman left-wing cavalry breaks without significant fighting. Some units try to form defensive positions. They're ridden down within minutes. Most just flee, streaming away from the battlefield north and west, pursued by Numidians who've been waiting all morning for exactly this moment. Within 10 minutes, 3,600 Roman cavalry cease to exist as a combat force. Maybe 800 escape. The rest are dead, captured, or so scattered they're militarily irrelevant. Think about what Hannibal has achieved by 11:30 a.m. He's destroyed 6,000 Roman cavalry with minimal losses. He controls both flanks completely. And now, he has 10,000 cavalry, 8,000 heavy horse under Hasdrubal, plus 2,000 Numidian light cavalry, free to operate against 80,000 Roman infantry who have no mounted support whatsoever. The Roman legions are about to learn what happens when infantry faces cavalry without protection. And the lesson will be written in blood, so thick it turns the dust to mud. The Roman army is completely encircled, surrounded on all sides. African heavy infantry pressing from left and right. Gallic and Spanish fighters still holding the center. And behind them, in their rear, Hasdrubal's cavalry closing the last gap. 70,000 Roman soldiers packed into a space meant for half that number. They can't maneuver, can't retreat, can't deploy their superior numbers effectively. Men in the front ranks are fighting for their lives. Men in the middle ranks are being crushed by pressure from all sides. Men in the rear ranks are being shot down by cavalry archers or charged by Hasdrubal's heavy horse. This is the pocket, the killing zone, the death trap that Hannibal has been constructing since the battle began. And here's the mathematical horror. Every minute, hundreds of Romans die. Every 10 minutes, thousands. They're not being defeated, they're being butchered, processed, eliminated with mechanical efficiency. The dust rises so thick, men can barely breathe. Blood soaks the ground until it becomes mud. And the killing continues without pause. 11:30 a.m. The encirclement is complete. Let's calculate the geometry of this nightmare. 70,000 Romans compressed into a space roughly 800 meters wide by 300 meters deep. That's 240,000 square meters. 70,000 men in 240,000 square meters means each soldier occupies approximately 3.4 square meters. Think about that. A standard parking space is 12 square meters. These men have less than 1/3 of a parking space each. They're wearing armor, carrying shields, trying to fight. And they're packed tighter than a modern concert crowd. Here's what this density does to combat effectiveness. Only men on the perimeter of the pocket can actually fight. That's maybe 15,000 soldiers maximum, the outer ring of the formation. The other 55,000 are trapped inside, unable to reach an enemy, unable to contribute anything except their own body weight. They're not soldiers anymore. They're ballast, human cargo waiting to die. And die they will, because the Carthaginians are attacking from every direction simultaneously. The African heavy infantry on both flanks are grinding through Roman formations with mechanical precision. They're not fighting individual combats. They're killing in assembly line fashion. Step forward, stab, step back, let the next rank advance. Romans die at approximately 100 per minute per flank. 200 Romans per minute dying to African infantry alone. That's 3.3 Romans per second. Every second, without pause. Hasdrubal's cavalry are circling the rear of the pocket like sharks. They're not charging into the Roman mass. That would be suicidal even for trapped infantry. Instead, they're using javelins, spears, archery. Shooting into the packed Roman formation where every projectile finds a target because the density makes missing impossible. Another 100 Romans per minute dying to cavalry harassment. The casualty mathematics are becoming apocalyptic. 300 Romans dying per minute, 18,000 per hour. At this rate, the entire Roman army will be dead by 6 p.m. But here's what makes the psychological horror even worse than the physical. Roman soldiers can see what's happening. Men in the middle of the pocket watch, comrades on the perimeter die. Watch the Carthaginian ring contract slowly inward. Watch the pocket shrink. And understand that their turn is coming. There's no escape. There's no rescue. There's no miraculous reversal. There's just waiting. Waiting in suffocating heat. Waiting in dust so thick it chokes. Waiting while blood soaks through sandals and turns the ground slippery. Waiting for death to reach your position. Some Romans try to break out. Groups of soldiers, hundreds at a time, attempt to punch through the Carthaginian lines. A few succeed. Small groups fighting through the encirclement, escaping into the Italian countryside. Most fail. They're killed in the attempt or driven back into the pocket. And each failed breakout attempt costs hundreds more Roman lives, burned in desperate charges that achieve nothing except adding to the body count. Noon. The battle has been ongoing for 2.5 hours. Approximately 20,000 Romans are dead. 50,000 remain trapped in the pocket. And the killing has barely begun. This massacre will continue for another 6 hours. 6 hours of systematic slaughter. 6 hours where the sun climbs to its apex and then descends while Rome's largest army is processed into corpses. The question isn't whether Rome will lose anymore. The question is whether anyone will survive to tell the story. The massacre lasts 8 hours, dawn to mid-afternoon. No ancient battle should last this long. Most are decided in 2 or 3 hours. But Cannae isn't a battle anymore. It's an execution. And executing 70,000 men takes time. Roman soldiers try to break out in every direction. Some succeed. Small groups fighting through the Carthaginian lines, fleeing toward nearby towns. Most fail. The Carthaginian noose is too tight, too well coordinated. And in the center of the pocket, something horrifying happens. Roman soldiers start killing each other, not from madness, from mathematics. Men dying of thirst, heat, exhaustion, crushing pressure collapse on their feet. Their bodies don't fall, there's no room. They're held upright by the press of men around them. Living Romans stand next to corpses, unable to move, unable to see, suffocating in human density. Some soldiers kill wounded comrades to create space, to grab a few inches of breathing room. It's not murder, it's survival, and it's the kind of detail the Roman historians will try to forget. But Carthaginian chroniclers will record with grim satisfaction. Noon. The temperature reaches 35 degrees Celsius. Men have been fighting for 3 hours in full armor. 20 kilograms of chainmail and equipment. No water. The dust is so thick it coats throats, makes breathing painful. Romans are dying from heat exhaustion as fast as they're dying from Carthaginian weapons. Maybe 15% of casualties at this point aren't from combat. They're from environmental factors. Men's hearts simply stop in the suffocating heat and density. Their bodies remain standing, propped up by the soldiers pressed against them on all sides. Here's what the chronicles don't tell you about the psychological collapse. Around 1 p.m., organized Roman resistance effectively ends. The formations dissolve. Officers are dead or have lost control. The standards have fallen. What remains isn't an army anymore. It's 70,000 individuals trapped in a killing box, each trying to survive the next minute. Some Romans drop their weapons, kneel, beg for mercy. They're killed anyway. The Carthaginians aren't taking prisoners. Not yet. Not while the battle continues. Prisoners require guards, and every Carthaginian soldier is needed to maintain the encirclement. 2 p.m. Approximately 35,000 Romans are dead. 35,000 remain alive in the pocket. Think about those numbers. 35,000 corpses in a space 800 meters by 300 meters. The ground isn't visible anymore. You're walking on bodies, stepping over the dead to reach the living. Blood has mixed with dust to create a paste that makes footing treacherous. Men slip, fall, get trampled by their own comrades. Some Romans wounded but not dead get buried under new corpses. They suffocate under the weight of the dead. The breakout attempts become increasingly desperate. Groups of 500 Romans, sometimes 1,000. form wedge formations, and charge the Carthaginian lines. They're trying to punch through by sheer mass and desperation. A few succeed. Maybe 3,000 Romans total escape this way over the course of the afternoon. They flee toward Canusium, toward Venusia, toward any town that might offer sanctuary. The rest die in the attempt. Their bodies add to the wall of corpses that make subsequent breakouts even harder. Here's where it gets genuinely insane. Around 3 p.m., the Romans in the center of the pocket start killing wounded Romans to create space. Not wounded enemies. Wounded friends, comrades, fellow citizens. A legionary with a leg wound who can't stand, who's taking up precious space, gets stabbed by the man next to him. It's pragmatic, it's rational, it's monstrous. But in a space where you can't move without touching 3 other men, where the living and dead occupy the same ground, where another 6 hours of this hell remains, the mathematics of survival override everything else. 4 p.m. Consul Paulus, wounded multiple times, still fights on the Roman right wing. He's trying to rally resistance, trying to organize a final breakout. Officers beg him to flee, to save himself, to preserve the Republic's leadership. He refuses. Quote 12, he tells them. Within 30 minutes, he's dead, killed by Carthaginian spears while defending a position that was already lost. His body will be found days later, identified by his signet ring, buried under a pile of Roman corpses 3 men deep. And the slaughter continues. When the killing finally stops, when the last pockets of resistance are eliminated or have fled, the Carthaginians count the bodies. 50,000 Roman dead. Some sources say 60,000, some say 70. The exact number gets lost in the magnitude. But here's what isn't disputed. Rome loses 80 senators in one afternoon. Consul Paulus dies fighting to the end. Both proconsuls die. 29 of 48 military tribunes die. Entire legions cease to exist. Their names struck from the rolls because there's no one left to carry the standards. Hannibal's forces collect 8,000 gold rings from the fingers of dead Roman aristocrats, equestrians, men of wealth and status who formed the backbone of Roman society. They pour the rings on the floor of the Carthaginian Senate like grain from a sack. The message is clear. Rome's elite just died in a field in southern Italy, and the Republic will never be the same. 5 p.m. The battlefield falls silent. After 8 hours of continuous slaughter, the noise stops. No more screaming, no more clash of weapons, no more war horns. Just wind blowing across a field covered in bodies stacked 3 and 4 deep in places. Carthaginian soldiers begin the grim work of counting, identifying, looting. They move through the corpses systematically, checking for signs of life. Finishing the wounded who won't survive, stripping valuables from the dead. The Roman casualties defy comprehension. 50,000 dead minimum. That's 62% of the army that marched onto this field this morning. Think about that ratio. Nearly 2 out of every 3 Romans who fought here are dead. In modern military terms, casualties exceeding 30% render a unit combat ineffective. Rome just lost 62%. The army didn't just lose, it ceased to exist. 8 full legions, the pride of the Republic, reduced to scattered survivors fleeing through the Italian countryside. Here's what makes the casualty list truly catastrophic. Rome didn't just lose soldiers, they lost leadership. 80 senators dead means 80 families who helped govern the Republic, who commanded armies, who managed provinces, who formed the institutional memory of Roman statecraft. Gone. Both proconsuls, Servilius and Attilius, dead. 29 of 48 military tribunes, the senior officers who lead legions, dead. These aren't replaceable losses. Training a legionary takes months. Training a senator who understands governance and diplomacy and military command takes decades. Rome just lost decades of institutional knowledge in 8 hours. The 8,000 gold rings tell their own story. In Rome, only equestrians, the wealthy upper class just below senators, wear gold rings. 8,000 rings means 8,000 aristocrats dead. These are property owners, merchants, tax collectors, the men who fund armies and political careers. Their estates will pass to sons too young to govern, to widows who can't vote, to relatives who lack the dead men's experience. The Roman economy just took a body blow that'll echo for years. But here's the demographic nightmare that historians often miss. Rome's population of adult male citizens is approximately 700,000. They just lost 50,000 in one day. That's 7% of their entire military-age male population. Dead. Not wounded, not captured, dead. Every one of those 50,000 corpses represents a farm that'll produce less, a family that lost a father or son, a community missing crucial members. Villages throughout Italy that sent men to this battle will have entire age cohorts simply vanish. Wedding announcements that should happen next year won't. Children who should be born won't. The demographic echo will ripple through Roman society for generations. Carthaginian casualties tell a different story. Approximately 8,000 dead. Most from the Gallic and Spanish center that absorbed the initial Roman assault. It's a brutal exchange rate. 6 Romans dead for every Carthaginian. In the cold mathematics of warfare, that's called decisive victory. In human terms, it's called annihilation. And now, as sunset approaches over a field soaked in Roman blood, Hannibal faces the question that will haunt him forever. What next? In the immediate aftermath, with Rome's largest army destroyed, with panic spreading through Italy, with allied cities defecting to Carthage, Hannibal's cavalry commander Hannibal rides to him with a simple proposal. Give me the cavalry. We'll ride to Rome tonight. In 5 days, you'll dine on the Capitoline Hill. It's not bragging, it's tactical assessment. Rome is defenseless. The city walls are strong, but they're manned by old men and boys. The Senate is paralyzed by grief and terror. Half of Italy is ready to switch sides. If Hannibal marches now immediately, Rome might surrender without a siege. Hannibal refuses. He knows how to win battles, Hannibal says, but not how to use victory. It's one of history's most famous insults, and it might be unfair. Hannibal has logistical concerns. No siege equipment, no reliable supply lines. His army is exhausted. But the question lingers through centuries. Why did the greatest tactical genius in military history achieve the perfect victory and then not exploit it? We still don't know. What we know is that Rome gets time to recover, to regroup, to adapt. And that time is bought by 50,000 men who died at Cannae. August 3rd, 216 BC dawn. Hannibal makes his case to Hannibal with brutal logic. Rome is 400 kilometers away. 10 days of forced marching. 5 days with just cavalry. The city's fighting-age male population just died at Cannae. The walls are 12 meters high, but spread across 11 kilometers. You can't man 11 kilometers of wall with old men and boys. Not effectively. Not against a 50,000-man army that just annihilated the Republic's best forces. If we march now, while panic is fresh, while the Senate is still processing casualty reports, we might not even need to assault. They might just surrender. Here's what makes Hannibal's proposal tactically sound. Intelligence reports confirm that Rome has no significant military forces between Cannae and the city. The field armies are destroyed. The garrisons are minimal. Hannibal could march almost unopposed, arrive at Rome's gates before adequate defenses are organized. The psychological impact alone might be decisive. Imagine being a Roman senator receiving news that Hannibal, fresh from massacring 50,000 Romans, is marching on the city with his entire army. Surrender might look rational compared to watching Rome burn. But Hannibal sees problems Hannibal doesn't. First, logistics. His army just fought for 8 hours. They're exhausted, injured, depleted. He's lost 8,000 men. Not crippling, but significant. The survivors need rest, medical attention, time to reorganize. Second, siege capability. Rome's walls are formidable. The Servian Wall, built 2 centuries ago, is solid stone construction designed to withstand exactly this scenario. Hannibal has no siege towers, no battering rams, no artillery. Taking Rome by storm would require equipment he doesn't have. Third, and most crucially, supply lines. Hannibal's been operating in hostile territory for 2 years. He feeds his army through foraging and captured supplies. Besieging Rome, even for a week, would require stockpiled food for 50,000 men plus cavalry. That's approximately 75 tons of grain per day. For a 10-day siege, 750 tons. He doesn't have it. Can't get it quickly. And while his army starves outside Rome's walls, those walls give Romans time to organize resistance, recall distant garrisons, negotiate with allies. Here's what the chronicles don't tell you about this decision. Hannibal might be right. Marching on Rome immediately could be the strategic blunder that costs him everything. His army besieging Rome without adequate supplies, without siege equipment, while Roman reinforcements converge from every province, could turn his greatest victory into his greatest defeat. Or Hannibal might be right. The psychological window where Rome considers surrender might only be open for days, and Hannibal's letting it close. We'll never know which tactical assessment was correct. What we know is that Hannibal doesn't march. He consolidates his position in southern Italy, accepts defections from allied cities, builds a coalition against Rome. And Rome, given this reprieve, this unexpected breathing space, bought by 50,000 corpses at Cannae, makes a decision that defies every military principle. They don't surrender. They don't negotiate. They don't accept that they've lost. Instead, they do something that will change military history forever. They refuse to quit. 2,000 years after Cannae, military commanders still study Hannibal's double envelopment. It's the template for encirclement warfare. The Prussians analyzed it. The Germans adapted it for blitzkrieg. The American armed forces teach it at every military academy. The tactical principles, deliberate weakness in the center to draw the enemy in, overwhelming strength on the wings to encircle, cavalry to close the pocket, remain fundamental to modern warfare. But here's the deeper truth about Cannae. It's the perfect tactical victory that achieved nothing strategic. Hannibal won the battle, destroyed Rome's army, terrorized Italy for a decade, but never conquered Rome itself. The Romans learned from this disaster, adapted their tactics, avoided pitched battles, ground Hannibal down through attrition and logistics. 15 years after Cannae, at Zama, Rome defeated Hannibal using his own tactics against him, and Carthage was eventually destroyed so thoroughly that Rome salted the earth where it stood. Perfect tactics don't guarantee strategic success. That's Cannae's final lesson. Perhaps more valuable than all the brilliant maneuvers, more enduring than the body count. You can win every battle and still lose the war. The tactical blueprint survives intact across millennia. In 1870, Prussian Chief of Staff Helmuth von Moltke studied Cannae before designing the encirclement strategy that destroyed French armies at Sedan. 660,000 French soldiers surrounded, forced to surrender. Emperor Napoleon III captured. Cannae's geometry adapted to modern warfare. In 1941, German panzer divisions executed double envelopments across the Soviet Union. At Kiev, 650,000 Soviets encircled in a pocket that used Hannibal's exact principles: mechanized cavalry closing the flanks, infantry pressing the center. At Vyazma, another 600,000. Cannae's lessons written in 20th century blood. Here's what makes this legacy genuinely fascinating. Every military academy teaches Cannae as the perfect tactical victory. West Point dedicates weeks to analyzing Hannibal's battlefield geometry. Sandhurst studies the cavalry coordination. The German Kriegsakademie made it required curriculum. Commanders are taught to create favorable force ratios, achieve local superiority, envelop enemy flanks, destroy rather than merely defeat. Cannae is the gold standard of tactical thinking. But here's where the strategic irony becomes devastating. Hannibal remained in Italy for 13 more years after Cannae. 13 years of winning tactical engagements, capturing cities, building alliances. And Rome simply refused to quit. The Senate passed a law forbidding discussion of peace negotiations. They recruited new armies from boys 16 years old, from slaves promised freedom, from criminals offered pardons. They raised legion after legion, sent them against Hannibal, watched them die or lose, raised more legions. The mathematics were brutal but simple. Rome had manpower reserves Carthage couldn't match. Population of 6 million versus Carthage's population of 400,000. Rome could lose 5 armies and raise a 6th. Carthage couldn't. The Romans adapted their tactics based on Cannae's lessons. No more massed infantry charges, no more seeking decisive battle. Instead, they shadowed Hannibal's forces, cut supply lines, avoided engagement, made Italy a strategic trap. The Fabian strategy, named after Fabius Maximus the Delayer, the cautious consul whose advice Varro ignored at Cannae. It was boring. It was inglorious. It worked. Hannibal was slowly strangled by logistics and attrition. 202 BC Zama, North Africa. Hannibal faces a Roman army commanded by Scipio Africanus, and Scipio uses Hannibal's own tactics against him. Double envelopment, cavalry superiority on the flanks, deliberate weakness in the center to draw the enemy in. Hannibal, the master of encirclement warfare, gets encircled. 20,000 Carthaginians dead. Hannibal survives, but Carthage sues for peace. The terms are devastating. Surrender all war elephants, reduce navy to 10 ships, pay 10,000 talents indemnity over 50 years, become a Roman client state. 50 years later, Rome finishes what Cannae started. Third Punic War, 146 BC. Roman armies besiege Carthage for 3 years, breach the walls, kill 50,000 civilians, enslave 50,000 more. Then they demolish every building, burn the ruins, reportedly plow salt into the earth to ensure nothing grows. Carthage, the city that produced Hannibal, that achieved the perfect tactical victory at Cannae, ceases to exist. Erased, removed from geography. And Rome, the civilization that lost 50,000 men in a single afternoon, becomes the dominant power in the Mediterranean for 6 centuries. That's the lesson. Tactical brilliance doesn't equal strategic victory. You can execute perfect envelopments, achieve decisive battlefield success, kill enemies at 6-to-1 ratios, and still lose if your enemy refuses to accept defeat and has deeper reserves than you do. Cannae changed how humans understand battlefield tactics. But it also taught the more important lesson about what actually wins wars. And that lesson is written in the ruins of Carthage.